Hey there friends, Dave Paulides, Canadian Missing Project, a copyrighted edition for our video channel, and this is a Skinwalker Ranch episode. This is for May 9th, 2023, and I gotta say, held my interest. It was interesting, and got my notes here. We'll go over some of the highlights and talk it out. But one of the things I wanted to go over was there was a lot of disparaging comments last week about my review. Not about me, but about the ranch. And there were like 4 or 5 people that said, oh, you know, this is all planned out and it's orchestrated and you guys don't know what you're talking about. Number one, these people are not actors, okay? And if you watch the expressions and the way they talk, if it was all choreographed, they'd have to be actors. They're not. And then you think somebody at the level of Travis, the physicist, would risk his entire career to fabricate a bunch of crap? No! This guy has worked at the highest levels in technology. There's no way he's going to do that. I mean, I laugh. There's something called cognitive dissonance. And people just have a really hard time believing some things in the world. And it's easier for them to just discount it and say, oh, it's all made up, it's not true. So I'll say this one more time. I've spent many hours with Colin Kelleher, who is the head of Bigelow's Ranch and science team. The man is impeccably credible. He never tried to lie to me. I told you I've gone through hours and hours of training on watching mannerisms, eye movement, etc. on people to tell if they're lying. He didn't lie. And we talked about so many different things at the ranch. Bigelow wouldn't have spent millions of dollars putting a team on that ranch at his expense for 8 years. Then the government came in for a couple years, but he did it all for 8 years. Mr. Bigelow is a very, very smart businessman. He's not going to waste his money to fabricate something for TV. But he pulled out for a reason. And I think it's becoming more and more clear to the people at the ranch today why he pulled out. And there was a gigantic issue tonight that I think pointed to that, and I'll get to it. So at that ranch, since the time the ranchers were on it prior to Mr. Bigelow buying it, they had cattle mutilations, they had movement of cattle. They put them in pens. The wife of the cattleman at one point was inside of her kitchen, came back from the grocery store. She unloaded all of her groceries on the counter, put them all away. She turned her back, went into the other room, came back out. Everything she just put away was back on the counter. Now, one of the things I actually asked Kelleher about that, and I said, is whatever doing this studying us and our reaction to what they did to us? He says, good question. Don't know. But that's pretty interesting to me. And then why would they mutilate people's cattle? And then why? Because that's their livelihood. Now, from the best I know, there's never been anything done to the ranchers that lived on the property personally. It was just their property on the ranch. But they did kill a cow that was on the ranch under the Skinwalker series that we watched a couple of years ago. So they do kill things. And then they talked about the third part of the ranch is unusual entities and energy. Now, is the energy the entity? Think about that. Or does the entity control the energy? I could get a headache thinking about that. So, now Travis at the very beginning of this episode tonight said he had never seen a rocket engine blow out the side of a rocket the way this one did. And he had been involved in thousands of rocket launches. Now, other people have said before on our video comment section that rocket engines blow up all the time. I know, I agree. But do they blow up like that one? When we got a close-up, kind of blew out the side. I don't know. And then they brought back this guy who had the high-speed cameras. And they were 1,000 frames per second. I think that's neat. I think it's really, really neat. But I'm still going to go back and I'll say something later on. I won't repeat it now, but I think there's a lot more that they could do with that they're not doing. And I'm not sure why. I'll talk about it. Then they replayed last week that as the rocket goes up into the sky, just as it's going up a little over 30 feet, this entity becomes more visible. And as it reaches that 31-foot height, the explosion happens. And then they brought up a very interesting point that last time they sent a rocket up, that it blew up, it was at 31 feet. I think that's really important. And is this thing stationary in the sky all the time? Or does it just appear when they're going to do something or test? That would be my question. Caleb made an interesting comment. Well, he said, is this thing that's hanging up there above the rocket that blew it up, is it a portal or a force field? And Travis said he's not ruling either out. For Travis to say that is important. Now, NASA has admitted that these things exist. Some physicists I have personally talked to, John Brandenburg, said they exist. So it's not a question of science-wise if they could be here. The question is, could they even acknowledge and know that they're looking at one when they were? Because, truthfully, if it's there in the sky above the ranch, would they know what they were looking at when they saw it? So in 2019, they found this energy at 3.5 millihertz, and it went to 1.6 gigahertz. And they said, well, is that the product of the wormhole? Now, there was flare right above the rocket at about the time of explosion. And they brought up a good point. Is that reflection off the entity, or is it a camera flare or light flare on the lens? I'm not sure. But if it could reflect off the entity, then does it become at some point an animate object? Only one frame of that bright light lasted a millisecond. So I've talked about this before. Every time a piece of equipment comes on the ranch and the landscape is changed at all, the ranch responds. It's almost as though the ground is a living entity. So I remember one time they brought this big bulldozer on and they were going to bulldoze things, and it just failed. They brought all kinds of drones up before it, they failed. I mean, you've watched this for a while. Things have a habit of failing when they are on the ground, when they leave the ground, when you disrupt the ground. Why? Why don't they want you touching the ground? Is there something about the shape of the ground there? is there something that we don't understand that's in the dirt and minute particles that's important to their work there that we don't understand? You got to really think outside the box. Is this thing so advanced that our mind can't comprehend why it's even there? That's important. So this heavy equipment arrives, and then they go back and they talk about previous week when they did the underground radar on the mesa. They said it's 20 feet wide and 100 feet tall. Now when I looked at this thing, when I stopped the video, it almost looks like there's 3 peaks in that ground on the LiDAR. 1, break. 2, off to the side, break. And 3. If you could think about the back of some dinosaurs, they have a almost like plates running down. It almost looked like there were 3 plates on this thing, and the middle plate was bent off to the side. And then the last plate, or the last, almost looked like a face. To me, it looked like half of it was missing. And it looked like an eye and a mouth at the very end or at the top. Very unusual. You know, the crane arrives, and they're monitoring this 1.6 gigahertz, and as soon as the crane arrives and starts moving rocks, boom, the 1.6 gigahertz kicks in. Let me explain something. There's technology that Border Patrol uses, and some prisons use it, that they put these round devices on the ground. And they put them at certain intervals, and you can't see them. Sometimes they bury them, put dirt on top. And they're programmed to react to human footsteps, not animals, footsteps. Specific, boom, boom, boom. And then they send a signal to a receiver, and they say, hey, in this quadrant, there's somebody walking through it right now. So my question is, in a much more advanced way, much more advanced, is there something at the ranch that activates similar to this that advises the entity that something's going on? Because if it is that disruption, then there's a reaction. So what's the mechanism for this entity to be advised? Now, you can say that 31 feet up in the air, they have this entity above the triangle. Now, is that there? The question, remember I asked earlier, is that here all the time? Or does it go away? Now, if that's there all the time, is that like a listening post, a lookout for the entity in a much more advanced way? I don't know. Well, this crane arrives, and before it even starts moving rocks, it fails. It goes down because it can't move part of its machine. And everyone just kind of laughs because you know what's going to happen. So it's like they sent the message, hey, we don't want you to do it, but we're not going to stand in your way. And after several minutes, crane starts working again. Now, stop right here for a second. The crane operator. He's just your average Joe Blow crane operator. You people out there that think that these people that come on the ranch are going to be lying for the series, are you out of your mind? If anything, they're going to snitch them out if somebody asks them to lie. Say, oh, it's all phony baloney, this didn't happen. Never happens though, does it? Because really these things are happening. So the crane operator couldn't pick up the counterweight. After several minutes, I'm sure he rebooted the whole machine, and they were working again. was kind of surprised that it didn't seem like they moved a lot of big rocks before the crane operator said, hey, that's enough, we got to move. I wonder if he didn't like the mojo in that area and he wanted to go, because it didn't seem right. And then Travis said the same thing I just said to you. Is this energy coming out of the ground, touching the equipment and shutting it down? Is that what's doing it? I don't know. Then they talked about the 1.6 gigahertz, the intensity growing as more rocks were moved. Again, is that something in the ground that ramps up higher and higher as more of the ground is disturbed? I'm really trying to think outside the box here, because thinking inside the box doesn't work. And you can say, well, Dave, those ideas are stupid and they're irrational. Well, I understand. But you have to be thinking on the cutting edge here to really make any progress, because whatever this is way smarter than conventional science. Then Brandon Fugal, owner of the ranch, he arrives, brings the Attorney General, Sean Reyes. And then Brandon's brother, the helicopter pilot, gets to watch the recording from last week of this helicopter coming in and kind of monitoring the ranch. A couple questions that I had about that. Did the ranch get from FAA that to be a no-fly zone because they're shooting rockets? They never said they did. Now, if it isn't a no-fly zone, anybody can fly over the ranch. It's not restricted airspace. So what's the issue? And they kind of blurred that point a little bit. They made a big deal because this helicopter's flying over. Well, I think it's a big deal because of the timing it arrived, but because it was flying over, hey, the ranch is a political and interesting hotspot for everybody in the world. You want to fly over, especially at night, see if you see a UFO, right? So, but we'll talk more about that helicopter in a second, or in a couple minutes. The brother said it was a Black Hawk U.S. military helicopter. Now, I want to talk to you a little bit about the Black Hawk, because I happen to know a little bit about that. So, just so you can visualize it yourself, that's what a military Black Hawk helicopter looks like. Pretty unusual. If you saw one during the day, you'd know, yeah, that's not your normal civilian helicopter. But it has a lot of functions. It can be used for fire suppression. It can be fixed in different ways. You can put big rocket propelled grenades on the side. You can do all kinds of really cool things with this helicopter to make it very deadly. But there's 4,000 of those Black Hawks in service worldwide. And the Army, our U.S. Army, has 2,135 of them. That's a lot. And they've been in service for the last 40 years. But you got to understand something. Those Black Hawks, just because the military has them, anyone associated with the government can get one through the military. So let's just say you're working in National Security Agency and you want one to fly around certain parts of the western U.S., you can ask the military to give you one. And that's really how it happens. And you can get one. And a lot of times even police departments can get old military equipment, Humvees, etc. So it's not like you can't get them. You can. So when they make a big deal that they say, oh, it's military, well, yeah, I don't think that one was military. Just saying. Because it landed at a civilian airport. Ka-ching. How do we find that out? because Sean Reyes came in later in the show and talked about how he got some people to track the path of that helicopter back to an airport. We'll talk more about that later again. Now, the triangle. They're going to keep poking the bear. They're going to use Brandon's helicopter. They're going to fly over the triangle, and they're going to drop these balls out the side. Kind of like what I explained earlier about flying over the helicopter and dropping powder down on top of it and seeing if it'll form over the top. Somebody said, yeah, why don't you drop gold dust? Yeah, sure. So they started at various levels. They started at 1,000 feet, went to 5,000 feet, and they were watching it with that high-speed photography as well. Well, it's kind of interesting because they dropped at 1,000 feet. And they didn't show us anything really about that. They zoomed in on it and fell straight through, the best I could tell. And then they went up to 5,000 feet. Now, give or take 1,000 feet, the ranch is about a mile high. They go up to 10,000 feet, so that's 5,000 feet above the ground. They start dropping balls again. And the helicopter starts acting weird. One of the guys said, well, is it acting weird above the triangle because there's some kind of space-time anomaly? Well, that'd be a good question. And is that why the GPS becomes wacky? Which it does. So Brandon Chilo drops 5 of these balls. And then as this is going on, Thomas starts feeling some pains in his head and his neck. He says, I'm going to leave. He's gone for 2 days. Now, do I think he should leave? Heck yeah. I remember when he had that big bulge in the back of his head, doctors couldn't decipher what caused it. I said, that's pretty serious. And if I started getting headaches again, yeah, I'd leave. But as I've told you before, the long-term effects of being at the ranch are not known right now. Thomas had direct effects. Travis had direct effects. He had radiation burns from being on the ranch a couple of years ago. Do I take that seriously? Yeah, I take it very seriously. And I find it kind of interesting because when they all first got to the ranch, they were wearing these little radar or radiation detectors on their shirts. I don't see those anymore. And I don't understand why. But how do they know this thing in the mesa isn't emitting radiation or doesn't start to emit radiation until you start taking the dirt and the insulation off of it? And maybe as a defense mechanism, you remove the insulation, meaning the dirt, and radiation starts emitting. I'd be concerned. I'd be wearing radiation detector. And then talking about Thomas getting this little thing in the back of his head. Question I have, and I want you to, again, thinking outside the box. Everyone in the world is different. And everyone's fingerprint is different. And everyone's DNA code is different. You realize how unique that is? Now, what if your head was an antenna? And it kind of is already, because you have these things. You hear things around you. Some people hear really good. Some older people don't hear really good. So, at that level, our antenna, our ears are picking up certain things. And then we have our eyes, another device to pick up things around us, another detection system. So, in the most basic sense, what if our head was a very advanced antenna? Because some people claim that they can hear mind speak from, say, Bigfoot. And then you have psychics that say that they can pick up things in their head from the dead. So what if the mind or your head was some type of very advanced antenna? And we're too stupid as a civilization to understand how this antenna really works. You know, we're happy if we can hear at 80 years old. We're happy if we can see at 90 years old, right? So what if there was a key to unlocking this so that you could really hear things and sense things and feel things through your pineal gland, let's say, that others couldn't? Would you want that? I've talked to a lot of people that said, no, I don't want Bigfoot in my head. I don't want him talking to me. I don't want him. Okay, but on that antenna level, is Thomas's antenna picking up certain frequencies that nobody else can? And those frequencies are getting stored in his head, and that caused the big bulge in his head. I don't know. Again, I'm thinking outside the box. And I'm thinking about what we have right now as a human. But if you know about the pineal gland, that really, if it's not calcified, that really can unlock many things, many abilities that most people do not understand. And look it up if you've never heard of it. Pineal. So the helicopter's flying around. Thomas gets the pain. He goes off. And he's gone for 2 days. Helicopter says that their GPS system, and they had a second one attached to one of the skids on the back, is going down. Well, lightning strikes in the area, and the pilot makes a good call. He says, hey, I'm going to land this thing. It's starting to rain, lightning in the area. We don't need this. Put it down for safety reasons. Smart. So they come in, they review all the data, and they see that, well, first of all, the people reviewing the data are smart. Very smart. Because when you lay other filters on pictures, you can see things that most people can't. I know this from being around people that deal with Bigfoot all the time. And when you place certain filters on, you can see certain things that you couldn't without it. And you're not altering the picture. You're just putting a different filter on. I don't know, most people, I hope, can understand that. Here's the best example. You have Polaroid sunglasses. You look at a river or a creek, and there's glare on the water. You really can't see anything past that glare. You put on some polarized sunglasses, you look down, the glare's gone, and you can see fish in the creek. That's really what a lens does, is it changes things up so you can see what you normally couldn't see. Excuse me. Now they come inside and they're going over Brandon's helicopter, flown by his brother, flying along about 5,000 feet. And they got this high-speed photography on it. And they start putting different coatings, lenses over the picture to see what they can see. And boom, bingo. they see a little ball down below and to the back of the helicopter. Huge find. Huge find. Now, is it that device, that little ball, that's throwing the GPS off? That's my question. And then, is that little ball controlled by the entity above the triangle? Was it dispatched to go screw with the helicopter at some level? But this wasn't said in the segment. Maybe it purposely wasn't said. But in my humble opinion, I think this is big, folks. I think it's very big. One of the guys in the room said the distance between the helicopter and the entity was 666 feet. You know what that is? I think most of you do. You're pretty smart people. So 666, if you look it up in different ways, it'll say different things, but it's the number of the beast. It's the devil or the Antichrist. Chapter 13, Book of Revelations in King James. This is what it said. Now, do you understand? What are the odds that it would have been 666? That's way outside the realm of probability. If you went to Las Vegas, that odds would be, I don't know, 10,000 to 1? Come on. That's bizarre. Now, there were rumors, strong rumors, that Mr. Bigelow and our government pulled out of Skinwalker Ranch because they believe that the entity was demonic. Now, Travis is super smart. Those men in the room are smart people. Why didn't anybody just say what I told you? Why? Are they going to say it next week? Are they just going to gloss it over? Or is it something about the production team that doesn't want that said? Because I guarantee, if I had been at that table and they had said, oh yeah, 666 feet, I would have said, whoa, 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 whoa. It's how? It's what? It's 666 feet. Okay, guys, get out the Bible. And I would have opened it up. And I would have made a big deal about it. But, again, some of you may say, oh, Dave, you're too much of a religious fiend and you're just trying to read too much into it. I'm not trying to read anything into it. I'm trying to lay out facts for you, folks. I didn't stretch 665 feet. I didn't reduce 667 feet. It was 666 feet. Now, that ball following the helicopter, Travis said it kind of looked like the ball that they saw earlier in this season, where it was almost two halves together with an indentation going around the middle. I really couldn't see it that well to make that judgment, but that ball looks like many, many UFOs I've seen over the years. Looks just like them. But the important point, with the naked eye, you would not have seen this, which is important. Was it meant to conceal itself because they didn't want the guys to see it? Because there's a lot of theory out there that UFOs when you see it, they want you to see them. There's a lot of stories where there are 10, 15 people in a group, and Pearson says, hey, right over here, right over there, see that UFO? And everyone in the group says, no, I can't see it, I can't see it, I can't see it. One person sees it, 2 people see it, but nobody else sees it. So is there something about wanting you to see it or not wanting you to see it? I think the revelation here that needs to be understood is why it was stealthy, concealed. But my guess would be it had something to do with control of that helicopter and the GPS. And if you remember, the GPS showed the helicopter going way up out of an arc. Well, we know it didn't do that. The pilot even said he didn't do that. So something was altering the GPS measurements to an extent that they were ridiculous. Now, did they know that if you had adjusted their GPS so it didn't work, that controlled the data that they were looking for? Maybe the entity thought that. I don't know. But they've had GPS issues many, many times. Now, I've heard many people say, oh yeah, you know, GPS goes down all the time. I've worked at GPS in planes for hundreds of hours. I've worked with GPS on drones, hundreds of hours. Never had it fail. Now, knowing that there was that orb below the helicopter changes the entire perspective for me on what's going on with above the triangle. And I'm going to say this again. I'm going to say this very clearly. The biggest mistake they're making out there, the biggest one, is that they're not using IMAX. Again, the frame on an IMAX camera is huge. It is so clear compared to conventional videography that little orb would have been crystal clear. I don't know if anyone's ever told them about IMAX, or there's some reason they don't want to use IMAX. I don't understand it, but it's a special licensing procedure because it's special technology, but they've got enough money to get it. I don't understand. And I don't mean to beat a dead horse, but I just did, so I'm sorry. Now, the Attorney General, Sean Reyes, he says that helicopter went back to Heber Valley Airport. And he made some inquiries, and they said, hey, none of your business. Again, I did some research on Heber Valley Airport. The best I could tell, there's no military presence there at all. It's all private airport, private jets, a lot of private jets. And as long as that helicopter wasn't breaking the law, I don't think they can do anything. Now they said, well, if he turned his transponder off, then he's breaking the law. Well, then they got something. But first of all the people have to say is, hey, my transponder just wasn't working that night. How are you going to prove it wasn't? Or, you know, we flew all the way out there and it just went down when we were flying around the Lone Ranch. Well, who could say that wouldn't be true? Because all kinds of electronics fail when you're flying over that ranch. I do find it suspicious that it wasn't on. But from that airport, Heber Valley, it's only a 20-minute drive to Park City. Park City's if you've never been there, Park City, Utah, it's a great little town, kind of a western ski town, beautiful, awesome place. If you ever get a chance, even in the summertime, to go there and just to see it, it's worth it. So anyhow, it's kind of my review for this week. I thought it was interesting. I thought the biggest kind of revelation was that orb below the helicopter. And I think we're going to see more of those kind of things now that they know that they could place filters over it and see things that they weren't seeing before. I think that's a big one. And the Blackhawk, I think it's kind of a off-ramp and waste some time and talk, and I don't really think it's going to be worth anything to follow that. I don't mean to be defensive of the series, but I know enough to understand that it's not doctored, it's not choreographed. Those people are not given lines and said to say things. It's too instantaneous, and they're not actors. And if they were making things up, you'd be able to tell right away. So, for what it's worth, I think that they could do a few things different, but on the whole, you're doing good work. So, come back to me soon. I'll have a missing persons video up quick, and you are very much appreciated. Please share this on your video channels. On your social media. I would be very grateful. And your comments are always appreciated. I always get a lot with this. So in the meantime, be nice to people in your community. If you see somebody who needs help, be kind. Because you know what? Kindness costs nothing. Paulides out.